Hello, my name is LaFell Peoples, and today we're going to discuss the basics of forensic accounting. But before we get into the details of my presentation, let's talk about a little bit of my background. I am a CPA since 1996. I spent 16 years in public accounting in a variety of different firms and working in a variety of different industries within that firm, from auto dealers to not-for-profits to banking to manufacturing and all the things in between. Now I've transitioned to the FBI, where I've spent the last 12 years as supervisory forensic accountant, supervising 12 professionals. And our responsibility is the financial investigations for all of Michigan for the Detroit Division of the FBI. With that experience and background in mind, I'll dig into the presentation. And what we're going to do today is we're going to define what forensic accounting is. We're going to talk about the variety of differences between forensic accounting and financial statement auditing. We're going to talk about what forensic accountants do specifically and what industries use forensic accountants, so we all can get a job once we get out of college. So let's move into the definition. And I'll read a couple of these. Forensic accounting utilizes accounting, auditing, and investigative skills to conduct an examination into the finances of an individual or business. Forensic accounting is the integration of accounting and auditing and investigative skills to provide quantitative financial information suitable for a court of law. I won't read the other two because I don't want to bore you already too much on a fantastic topic. But if you look at the screen and kind of notice and read these definitions, there are a couple recurring themes. And as the presenter, I expertly bolded those terms too, is investigative. We are forensic accountants investigate. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of what a forensic accountant will do. They will take their base for their accounting and auditing knowledge and build and broaden and expand that knowledge beyond just the financials of a circumstance and situation. That's what a forensic accountant will do. You'll also notice that as you're looking at these definitions, accounting and auditing is also kind of baked into these definitions. So there is a logical, you will see that there's a logical connection between accounting, auditing, and forensic accounting, which we will discuss and kind of go into what those differences are. So forensic accountants analyze a specific set of transactions. They'll look into the details of those transactions. They'll will go and make sure we understand the intent and the surrounding circumstances of those transactions. Conversely, an auditor examines and evaluates the financial statements as a whole for the entirety of an organization. Auditors will review a few transactions, but they're looking at the entire organization. Again, forensic accountants are only looking at a specific set of circumstances and transactions. Auditors' procedures, which are governed by generally accepted auditing standards, are designed to provide assurance that the financial statements are fair and accurate representations of the financial position of the organization. Forensic accountants procedures, again, created on a case-by-case basis, are designed to detect fraud and discover crime or intent or likelihood of a crime being committed. Again, completely different tax there. Forensic accountants procedures routinely end up in legal or legal proceedings, either civil or criminal. Again, on the other hand, auditors' results end up in an opinion letter that's attached to the financial statements of the organization. And again, while they are completely helpful in ensuring that the financial statements are fairly presented, they rarely go beyond that purpose and beyond that. Again, forensic accounts reports can go to a variety of different spots and purposes, which we will discuss as we go down the line in this presentation. The final and starkest difference between forensic accountant and the auditor's procedures is the concept of materiality. Auditors live and die by materiality. It dictates what kind of testing they do, the extent of the testing, the amount of testing, all determined by the materiality. Forensic accounts, on the other hand, very rarely even deal with materiality. And I'll give just an example of that. I'm currently working on a case, fictitious, where contractors, fictitious, are trying to bribe fictitious government officials. And they're using $25 gift cards as the bribe. I'm not sure what official would just take $25, but fictitiously, that's what's happening. So we, as the forensic accountants, have to look at every single transaction over $25. Now, that could be a ton of transactions, but because we don't have that materiality, and each instance could be a example of fraud, we have to look at every single transaction. Again, two different tracks. Forensic accounts looking at the specific, going down to detail as necessary. Auditors taking a broad overall picture of an organization. Now that we've kind of talked about the approach and the differences between the forensic accountant and the financial statement auditor, we're going to dig deeper into what forensic accountants do on a day-to-day basis. First, we're going to start, forensic accountants are responsible for all the financial aspects of an investigation. Forensic accounts will determine what records we're going to look at, to what extent we're going to look at them, and how they're connected to the crime and the financial, from a financial perspective. That is what the forensic accounts do and are related to the investigation. The non-financial members of the case are not looking at it at all. So it's the forensic accountant's job to make sure they handle the entirety of that piece of the investigation. As part of their investigations, we review and unbundle complex financial transactions. Again, we're making sure that the transactions involved and the circumstances surrounding these complex transactions, if there are any illegalities there, if there's any other criminal intent, we are designing our test to make sure that we uncover those. Beyond looking at the complex financial transactions, we're also looking at the run-of-the-mill day-to-day transactions as well. So that means we're looking at bank statements and investment statements. That deposit for $400, we're looking at that. That check we wrote to DTE, we're looking at those and reviewing those investment statements for that activity. We're looking at mortgages and other bank agreements, lease agreements, to make sure, again, that anything in there doesn't have a criminal intent or has some fraudulent nature. Financial statements, whether compiled, reviewed, or audited, or 10K in a public company, we're reviewing those too, again, to see if there's any criminal intent or activity that we need to review to make sure we include in our reports. We'll review general ledgers, journal entries made by companies to see if they're hiding anything in those books and records. We'll review auditors and accountants' work papers to make sure that they haven't discovered anything that needs to be uncovered and reported. And finally, tax returns. Big investigations and very large engagements will handle all of these events and look at every single one of them when we do our analysis. And we'll put all this information into our final reports that, again, that we'll share. Speaking of those reports, again, we forensic accountants will produce tons of summaries and present findings to special agents, attorneys, insurance agents, law officers, and they will glean the information they need from our reports to put into their affidavits, into their court filings, into their claim reports, just to make sure that they there cover all their pieces, the financial pieces of the investigation. We'll explain those numbers in summaries in court proceedings. That, again, is part of the everyday procedures a forensic accountant will do. One of the biggest things that we do is that forensic accountants will participate in interviews and interrogations. Law enforcement officers use forensic accountants during interrogations to confirm, deny, refute, corroborate financial statements made by their subjects during the interrogation. At this point in the presentation, I'm going to stop and toot my own horn on how great I handled one of these situations. One of the cases I worked on, an agent was interrogating one of his subjects, and it was not going well. The guy was elusive when it was related to any financial transactions, very aloof, and not really giving any details. And quite frankly, as the agents communicated to me, was pretty smug about the entirety of the questions. Agent stopped the interview and interrogation and asked me to come in and sit in and just listen to what's being said. So as I came into the room, he introduced me as LaFell Peoples, supervisory forensic accountant, CPA, leader of all financial investigations in Michigan. And I think I heard an echo in the background. I think I heard horns going off in my mind. But I think in the subject's mind, the same thing was happening because his whole tenor of the conversation changed. He went from being aloof to kind of nervous and kind of worried about the comments he was making related to the financials of the case. At the end of the interview, this guy was much more forthright and much more cooperative because he did not think he could pull the wool over the financial guy's eyes. After the interview was over, I think the agents wanted to hand me dollars and give me all the accolades, but I told them, stop. It's just an everyday thing for a forensic accountant to save the day. So that was one of the better case examples of where we, as part of the interrogation process and interview process, can help the case move forward. And that's not all we do. We also explain the nature of the financial crimes. That's kind of our job in the case, to leave the legal pieces to the attorneys and law enforcement and the forensic account to explain how the financials work and intertwine within the case. As I'm kind of alluding to, we also testify in grand juries, in open court, in derogatories where we discuss the mediation type places within the case and give our expertise to the financials. We trace funds from illegal activities that went to purchase assets. We trace those and then makes it able that we seize those items back and disperse them back to the victims. Without a forensic account, those type of analysis cannot be done. Those in the law enforcement arena love that identification of assets and the seizing because it adds an additional hammer to their case. Not only can they throw a criminal in jail for multiple years, but they also could take all of his assets so that when he gets out, he cannot continue to do those illegal activities. A very powerful piece of a service that forensic accountants provide. In addition, we handle due diligence reviews. So when companies are being sold, both parties want to make sure that the price that's being paid for that entity is fair. Forensic accountants come in and review records for both sides and make sure that there's no financial transactions of an inappropriate manner involved in that. There's no fraud involved in that entity, so that they can make a realistic price related to the sale. Finally, forensic accountants can assist in detection and prevention of fraud. Again, as auditors are out there doing their procedures, they might notice something weird. So instead of them stopping the regular audit procedures, they'll bring in a specialist, the forensic accountants, to review the transactions and see the extent of the fraud, what type of fraud is being occurred, and ways to prevent it. And we'll talk about that more as we talk about which industries utilize forensic accounting. So as you're noticing, there's a lot of activities that forensic accountants do. They have accounting and auditing in nature, but they expand beyond that. And most of these industries recognize that the forensic accountant expertise is vital to what things that they can, their procedures and what services they can provide. The biggest and largest area is litigation support. And that is big law firms, small law firms, big corporations, all utilize forensic accountants to help them when they have disputes to zero in on what those disputes are. For example, forensic accountants can quantify the damages of a specific circumstance. They'll come in and put a number to what fraud or alleged fraud is occurring. Forensic accountants are pivotal in legal disputes and settlements. Forensic accountants serve in these litigation support situations as that unbiased and impartial person that comes in and gives a dollar value to what's going on to the dispute that both sides can rely on. And then it makes the mediation process much smoother and goes on a lot quicker. In addition, again, like we talked about, being testifying and being an expert witness, there's nothing like bringing in a CPA to talk about your financials. It gives it rises the level of your case to a different level. The jury appreciates seeing an expert come in and respect it. I've been served as a expert witness multiple times, and what I found is that during cross-examinations, even the other side has a reverence for the forensic accountant. We're put on like a pedestal where we're above reproach. They're not sure what questions they can ask, and they don't want to upset us. So there's no crying on the stand for a forensic accountant. We're revered. In the insurance world, insurance agents use forensic accountants to kind of establish the damages for their claims, to make sure the damages are of the right amount, whether they're too high or too low, to make sure they're substantiated. They also bring in forensic accountants to dispute fraudulent claims. A claim that looks like it's a little fishy, a forensic accountant can kind of give them the pointers to see where the claims are fraudulent. Banks have whole departments chock full of forensic accountants. They use the forensic accountants to make sure that the loan documents that are being produced make sense for the loan customers before they take on new deposit clients, and make sure that their activities aren't fraudulent before they bring them in as a customer. Again, banks, investment entities use forensic accountants all the time. I like to lump law enforcement and government agencies together because this is a huge growth industry for forensic accountants. Law enforcement, local police, county, city, federal, all law enforcement use forensic accounts to deal with that financial piece of every crime. If you will talk to any law enforcement, or as a matter of fact, any attorney, they say every crime has a financial aspect to it. So that keeps forensic accountants busy digging into that financial piece of the crime. As for government agencies, the FBI is a perfect example of the use of forensic accountants. The FBI has hired over the past 6 years over 600 forensic accountants, and we're always looking for more. We're in every single state, every single division has forensic accountants, and we're expanding the role of those forensic accountants. The final and largest and most logical spot for forensic accountants is in the public accounting firms. As students are out here interviewing, most public accounting firms have three kind of positions that they hire for. It's the auditor, it's the tax preparer, the tax professional, and the forensic accountant / consultant. These are the three tracks that they have within their accounting firms. And each of those need the forensic accountant for different purposes. The forensic accounting department in the public accounting firms run their own engagements. A particular client has a fear that they're being taken to the cleaners by their accountant. They bring in the forensic accountant to review what that accountant did and kind of assess what the damages are, what extent the fraud has occurred, or whether it occurred at all. Sometimes we go in and figure out there was no fraud, but when there is, they come up with ways to deter that from happening in the future. In audit engagements, when the audit team is out there and they see some fishy transactions or something weird, they bring in the specialist specialists, the forensic accountants, to make sure that whatever they're seeing makes sense and is truly not fraud or is fraud, or gives the client some direction on how to prevent this from happening in the future. With that, that brings an end to my presentation on the basics of forensic accounting. I hope you students out there have an opportunity to kind of review what we've discussed, and hope that gives you an opportunity to make career decisions based on this information. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.